than 10 years of age will show an increased aggression immediately after playing violent video games. This is a trans study over 28 articles, one of the few that I could find that analyzed various articles on it. So we've got violent content. We've also a lot of violent imagery in the games themselves, and a lot of violent fantasy imagery as well. The second thing that hardly needs talking about, but I, again, could not resist, was really the amazing proliferation, even my job dropped at this, on sexism in video games. It was illuminating to do this research. Some of the most impressive work on sexism in video game that I really liked was done by a video commentator, maybe some of you know him, Carmine DiStefano. I thought this guy was actually quite interesting. I looked at his other videos, but I'm only going to show a brief minute-and-a-half clip from his work, because he's put together all of these video games analyzing sexism in video games.
But she was a much better role model than Princess Peach. Years of gaming technology progressed. Capcom gave us Jill Valentine, tough, strong, and decisive. So naturally, they put her in a revealing tube top and boy shorts to sate men's appetites. Kinda like Chris Redfield's sister Claire, yeah. Around that time also came the pixelated PG porno princess Lara Croft. Her purpose was to get guys off by dressing in snug outfits while running through dangerous caves. Games like these and fighting games make you wonder why adaptable women would leave so much bare. Then DOA showed us why, with shit like this. Oh, come on! It's just a bunch of colorful sprites. Capcom again gave women prominent roles in male-dominated areas, though they also supplementarily served as eye candy. Really, Cammy's just naked with boots. Mortal Kombat has their female characters fighting in bikinis, more or less, and if this isn't enough of an indication where the programmers' minds are, so, huh? A naked Melina with tape and anatomically correct movements of specific areas should be. No one's worse, though, than Square Enix, who dedicated an entire title to show chicks dancing in Daisy Dukes. In Final Fantasy XIII, which I reviewed earlier, the women dressed provocatively for no reason. How easily can you look up Vanille's skirt? Seriously! Capcom answered with DMC, basically any female character dressed like a stripper minus the undergarments.
Well, we could go on. It's really interesting when Chris Paul was talking about all these gamers and games. Weren't you kind of struck? I didn't hear any women gamers in those descriptions. I'm sure there are. But of the games, it's a very male-dominated, even the game makers, it's a very male-dominated field. The kind of last area that I want to touch on, and only briefly, is addiction in video games. There's a lot of controversy around addiction, and I recognize some of that. But as one gamer said, any designer worth the salt keeps players sitting way past the point where they need to piss. I thought I could have said that. But video games are designed, quite frankly, to keep you in your seat. And so that's what they do. Some people would argue that more than 4 to 5 hours a day are signs of addiction or compulsive gaming. And it's no surprise. Video game addiction is often synonymous with gambling. They're treated as somewhat analogous. And the prospect of winning, the intermittent reward systems, the increased dopamine and so forth that goes on biologically, a lot of work's being done on this, and especially with young children, and how it's cultivating habits of addiction. What has amazed me the most is the reflections of people that are addicted and will acknowledge that to the games themselves. I've been very impressed. I've watched several of these. They're really quite insightful. What fascinates me the most is that as they comment on the dark side of video games, they also recognize that they can't stop playing them. Here's one video gamer of, well, what is that? World of Warcraft addiction. and speaking on his own kind of reflections on his own participation in the game itself.
I've been playing World of Warcraft for about 3 years, 2 to 10 hours, 2 to 15 hours, every day. I like the whole player versus player aspect. You get to kill other people, I mean, not in real life, but in the game, and see what the reactions are, and what they say. And, you meet a lot of new people. I've met people in Australia that I still talk to every day, and they're really cool. Basically, just meeting new people is pretty much a really good benefit. From my personal experience, I've gained a lot of weight from it. I really didn't lose friends, but some of them I really don't talk to that much anymore. There's been some other things in my life that I've been addicted to, but World of Warcraft or these MMOs, it's a pretty big addiction. I mean, I know a lot of people they get addicted to it and they can't stop playing it. And
okay, you get the gist. Look at the lights on. Well, those are some of the themes, but not the ones I want to talk about tonight. I have a change of game plan. I'd like to shift the basis of this debate to existential and philosophical questions pertinent to video games themselves. Clearly, we are not talking about the 30-minute or even 1 hour a day escapist routines similar to reading the newspaper. What I'm addressing are the issues of prolonged usage, the games that suck you dry. There is a common distinction between light, medium, and hardcore users. And I'm pretty much talking about people that are working about an hour or more a day. There are 4 themes that I see to this debate that are critical for the quality of our lives. Writing our own story, seeking to be authentic, resisting the world of diminishing returns, and reclaiming intention and passion. Writing our own story. Video games are not your story. They're not my story. The algorithms, codes, characters, plots, scripts are of someone else's making. However creative the visual character, it is not you. Video games pose a profound existential question. Do we seek to be the authors of our own lives? To narrate our story, cultivate our plots, engage in our own list of characters, to speak our own script. In trying to understand how we narrate our own story, I found myself returning to the work on creativity, especially in writing itself. And then I realized that the process of creation is really about who we are, our essence. And so I share with you tonight the creative process of Roald Dahl, author of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and James the Giant Peach, classic books in their own right. This is from an essay on Roald Dahl and the creative process. Dahl's writing took place in a shed, hidden behind his greenhouse at the same time every day, at the break for lunch, which he said is always the same, Norwegian prawns with a half a lettuce. Once inside, his isolation was complete. As Dahl said, no one goes there but me. He steps into a sleeping bag, pulls it up to his waist, and settles himself into a faded, wing-back chair. The scene may seem depressing, almost an archetype of sensory deprivation. No view, no natural light, no noise, no interruptions. Dahl's process is obviously very isolated, very banal. Perhaps it was the sparsity that's the real inspiration, forcing him towards his imagination, towards his memory. Dahl himself emphasized the importance of his hours in the shed, insisting that any story builds and expands while you're writing. All the best stuff comes at the desk. He would start with a journal of an idea and then build around it. He wrote, you work it out, you play around it, you doodle, you make notes, and it starts to grow and grow. Isn't Dahl really talking about how we author and narrate our own lives? That we doodle, we imagine, we reflect, we contemplate, and sometimes maybe we take a pencil and create? At the heart of authoring our own lives is the process of creativity, insight, and reflection. I believe the depth of the creative urge and production lies in solitude, away from the herds and the deafening crowd. Creative people are not really alone. They're having intense love affairs with themselves. Henry James once said that the essential loneliness of his life constituted his deepest aspect. But writing your own story does take work. Or as the British would say, it takes graft. We know when we're writing our own story, we feel alive. Even when we're in ecstasy or whether we're in angst, we feel our oats, we feel unique, we feel our essence. There is no question that we express the self away from the crowd and everyday distractions. Research shows that people are more creative and they enjoy privacy and the freedom from interruption, from distractions. But the problem today is that we are seduced, besieged by weapons of mass distraction. It's very hard to author our own story. Picasso said that without great solitude, no serious work is possible. So if we are to get to the serious business of authoring our own lives, perhaps like Dahl, we need to retreat, cozy up in our sleeping bag, to imagine, to create, to doodle. My second theme, seeking to be authentic and real. We just found this the other day. I thought it was like unbelievable, these images. Seeking to be authentic and real versus imaginary and virtual. Authenticity is a concept that goes back to the Greek philosophy, know thyself, and certainly we know to thine own self be true. Owning one's own experience, be it our thoughts, our emotions, our needs, wants, preferences, and beliefs. But we act in a way that is consistent with our inner thoughts and feelings. During the 60s, it used to be that we were alienated from our real self because the outside expectations, normative pressure, all the other, a la Reisman and the Lonely Crowd. The theme song was, I've gotta be me. Today, the theme song is, I've gotta be we. And the other is now the reimagined virtual other. In his prophetic text, The Saturated Self, Gergen argues the self now is so saturated with social demands that we become nothing but a multi-phonic personality without a core sense of self. His thesis has implications for authenticity. We're now facing with video games a cacophony of potential selves. One week, one game character, another week, another game character. Listen, I'll grant the creativity of immersion in our limited selves. In fact, I think fantasy is great. Difficult to make loving relationships. And I would argue that authenticity is what you bring to the table. Otherwise, we're but a pastiche, if you will, parroting popular culture. It's your essence that no one can duplicate. It's the uniqueness. It's you. I think there's no question that fantasy, imagination, experimentation, imitation widens our experiences, creates possibilities. But as one philosophy professor said to me, I've heard people talk about how they lose themselves playing video games. I've never heard anyone say, I found myself. Video games are fun, but their very purpose, let's face it, is to free you from writing your own story. That's why they represent escapism. You get caught up in their narrative, not yours. And what about claims that video games provide all the social contact, a sense of community? What? A faux community, ersatz friends that await your every click? What constitutes authentic community? In her book, Alone Together, Turkle describes the illusions of virtual friendships as friendships. The unidimensional relationships are often not only 2D, but they're 2D metaphorically. Virtual ties that tend to be highly context-bound, focused on the game. They rarely migrate beyond the screens. Turkle, in speaking about our virtual friends, quotes another computer professor who said, you may have over 500 virtual friends, but it doesn't change who you'll donate your kidney to.
Yeah.
I have no doubt that various communities of interconnected people who share a common goal emerge through multi-game users.